Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. Deal Quest viewers and listeners, I am so excited to have Damon Gersh back on the Deal Quest podcast. Damon was a guest on episode 25 when we were a little baby podcast a little over 2.5 years ago. And now I've got him back when we've hit top 2% on listening notes. So Damon is the founder and CEO of Maxims. And we're going to have an evolution here, and that's what we're going to be talking about. But it was the founder and CEO of Maxims, which is a widely recognized as an innovative leader in the emergency property damage restoration industry with specialized expertise and resources to help residential, commercial, and industrial clients successfully recover from all types of disasters. He was a real pioneer in the industry, been around for years and years. When we spoke to him, at episode 25, and you should go back and listen to that episode. It would be a really great, you'll see the evolution. Damon had, and we'll recap it, very quickly in this episode. Damon had put some things in place for his management structure and sort of had his cake and ate it too. He wasn't spending a lot of time in the business and he was running it. And at that time was not planning, at least in that moment, to sell it. And now has evolved. And what he's done is he's since sold the company to First Onsite Property Restoration, which is the second largest company in the industry. They have over 2,000 employees, and he now serves as a strategic advisor to that company. So, Damon, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Corey. It's a pleasure to be back.
Well, it's great to have you. Listen, as a friend and client of mine, and fellow EOer and fellow past EO president, I'm personally excited for you with this evolution, and I think it's going to be really instructive to our listeners and viewers, to see the evolution. I'm always talking about the mindset of a deal maker and how things evolved and why you weren't looking to exit then, but then you did. So I think it's going to be really fascinating. But before we go through all that stuff, and my questions are a little different than they were back on episode 25. So, but I want to take you back and maybe you might have talked about this a little bit the first time around, but when you were a little kid growing up, what did you want to be? Because I know your dad was in the business. So, was this on the radar or was it, something else at that 8, 10, 12-year-old age?
It really wasn't on my radar. I'd say it'd probably be rock star and athlete were, probably not that unusual. But I think as I got older and I needed a summer job and started working with my dad, that was when I think the idea of not only, getting to work alongside my dad, who was an entrepreneur for 60 years, but also, learn a very interesting business that was different every day.
I love it. Well, I have to say, and I hope it's not out of turn, Damon said that he wanted to be a rock star back then. I happen to know that after this interview, he's heading to band practice. Isn't that what you told me?
That is true. And we have it right here in my basement.
So, the rock star dream has not left you.
You got to keep it alive.
I love it. Okay. And what was your first deal of any type that you can remember you did? It could be something little when you were a kid or something early in the business or anything that comes to mind that's a deal.
Oh, boy. Legal or illegal?
That might be the answer. I might say it all.
There you go. I'll leave it there.
Okay, perfect.
But probably in high school sometime.
Okay, got it. That's awesome. All right. So listen, why don't I let you just take a few minutes and recap where you were, right? 2.25 years ago, episode 25, and the conversation we had of sort of, what you put in place, what you had, what your thinking was, at that point, what your concerns were that you had seen. Let's do it. We don't have to people should go back and listen to the whole episode, but let's give them a few minute recap so we can set the stage for how things evolve.
Happy to do it. So I started the business with my dad when I was 21 years old, so right out of college. So as you know, as an entrepreneur, Neo, 100-hour plus weeks to get this thing off the ground, turn it into something sustainable, and just learned how to grow the business, how to scale the business, and all the things that go into that. In the 90s, all the technology evolution and all that. It was like, I felt like a time traveler, right? Internet, email, fax machines, from pagers to alphanumeric to cell phones to all that. So, through that whole very interesting time to be starting and growing a business. And through entrepreneurial learning, I kind of learned how to scale a business, and probably not in the way that my dad did, where he was everything to the business,
Mhm.
and he loved the industry. He loved being the man and being at the center of everything. And that was one of my hesitations to get into this business. It's an emergency business, 24 hours a day. We joke in the industry that the biggest disasters happen at Friday at 5 p.m. when you're ready to go away for the weekend. So I can't tell you how many vacations I've canceled and sacrifices that my wife has made, and through all the years of responding and being the man. And I think through EO and learning, through coaches and reading and just how to scale a business. So I'll just plug the E-Myth here as a great example.
Yeah.
And I saw Michael Gerber in 1995. And he said, if you work in your business, you're not an entrepreneur. You got to work on your business. And if you read the book, really, he is very clear that the purpose of having a business is to support an amazing life, right?
Yeah.
That you're a human being first, having a life, and an entrepreneur is just part of that life, not the other way around. But I've certainly experienced being engrossed as an entrepreneur. And, it seems like you're an entrepreneur 24/7, because that's what it takes to get the business started. But then after a while, you have to reinvent yourself to obviously make it sustainable, delegate, build a team, and grow and scale a company. Otherwise, you'll just be chief cook and bottle washer forever.
Yeah.
So I'll just fast forward years of, working on the business, developing a leadership team, opening locations, and really being able to kind of get out of the day to day and really be, visionary and, a true executive, making kind of strategic decisions and letting my team execute on those. So I think when we spoke at your podcast a couple of years ago, I had been in the business approaching 30 years.
Yeah.
So 2020 was my 31st year in the business. So, and it was also the year that my youngest child, Debbie, was going off to college. So my son had already gone off. So I kind of saw strategically, right, that there was a change of life coming, that we were going to become empty nesters. So it didn't make sense to make any big change of control or anything while the kids were in school. You want to be around for all of that. That was part of that. Also to not be engrossed by the business, to be there for every dance recital, basketball game, cheer practice, all that stuff. So with that kind of phase of life was coming to an end, and 30 years in the business, I kind of felt I had a fantastic team that I'd grown and developed, and it was time that I would kind of graduate to be a chairman and be a true executive and let my team run the business. So at that time, you and I had worked together on how do we align the motivations and incentives of the team so that I can go off and maybe explore some other interests that I have. And as you say, have my cake and eat it. So my team feels that we're on the same page, and not that they were doing all the work and I was off on a boat somewhere getting all the benefits.
Yeah. And listen, that was really, instructive. And I think it's powerful because you really were able to achieve that. You had it set up where you built an amazing management team. They were running, a very successful company under, your vision and guidance, but, you had a lot of freedom, right? At that point, you weren't humping it every day like you did to build it. You got to the point where you had a team that basically could run the thing largely without you certainly in terms of day to day, right?
Certainly. I think in the couple of years leading up to 2020, I was probably in the office less than 30 days a year, probably less and less. I first started to take off the summers, and I was always available. I let them know that if you need me, if it's if mommy help me, I'm bleeding emergency, I'll pick up on the first ring. but
Right.
I think I did a good job developing a team and having great people that they would never call me. So I felt a little like they didn't need me, which was good on some level, a little sad on another.
Yep.
But yeah, so 2020 was really, I was developing a 2020 vision. So personally, graduating, with my empty nest status, and still being young to, enjoy other things in life besides just the business. And then perhaps graduating from the business a little bit to a chairman role and letting my team have the glory and the entrepreneurial opportunity.
And great, and I remember we talked back then, like you had set it up, obviously the economics were very lucrative for you, you weren't working much. And there was part of you, if people listen back at that interview, it wasn't like you had in any way ruled it out. It just wasn't at that time of the time that you were going to, and this was, I guess, 2019, right? So it's before you hit that went into that 31st year and a year or so before the empty nest, right?
Right.
And whether it was life circumstances or whatever, you at that point, at least you were like, hey, this is a pretty good deal. I don't necessarily need to sell this thing. And you and I had a discussion about the fact that we knew some folks that had sold some things and maybe had some regrets about it or didn't know what to do with themselves or,
right.
Invested in other companies and that wasn't really satisfying. So, right, that was on your mind back then. So let's talk about what evolved in a couple of years, in your, sort of evolution thinking, opportunity that showed up, whatever it was, like what happened in the 2.25 years from episode 25?
Well, through the virtual equity plan you helped me craft, it really was a bespoke plan. I felt that we collaborated on that. And it really, the idea was what I wanted to align the incentives with my management team. So there was certain incentives that if they stayed until they retired, they got some kind of payout. If they stayed or if they were fired, they kind of forfeited certain rights. But the real brass ring at the end of the day, because there were formulas on the EBITDA, was that if we ever sold, that they got a pro rata share. So that was really in the background, was always perhaps the most lucrative exit. Yep. Understanding that selling to my team was not really an option because they don't have the funds. That's one. Two, they, being my team, I certainly wouldn't command top dollar from them. They'd probably get it at a steep discount. Great for them, not so great for me. And then they'd probably have to take financing on and service debt. So really the holy grail there was if we ever decide to sell, that would be the best win-win scenario. So I wanted them to know that if I ever did decide to sell, that I wasn't doing it to them, but I was doing it with them.
Right.
So what happened, I think a lot's happened since we spoke in 2019. And I think that's probably a good way to look at it, that, it's like there's an old saying, man plans and God laughs, right? Yeah. So this was the plan. We put it in place and it worked, right? Because there was also an executive comp structure, on growth of EBITDA, and my team was killing it. So it was win-win all the way around. They were doing a great job learning, growing, making money. I was making money and having a great lifestyle, without being in the office very often. So it was working. And then COVID hit. Yeah. Right. So COVID was actually pretty good for our company because we did a lot of bio cleanups early in the phase and all that stuff. So, but certainly that wasn't part of the plan, right? And then as things shut down, as office buildings and, because a lot of our clients are real estate, gyms, hospitals, hotels, restaurants, all those facilities are now closed. So we did see a dip in the business. Yeah. But I knew it was temporary and I was willing to forego it. But in the background of all this, there's a lot of deal activity going on in my industry. So, and we were the largest in New York City. We still are. So certainly I was getting calls all the time, inquiring about selling. And I actually would take calls from the credible ones, who, because there's a lot of incredible ones just kind of dialing for dollars. So a lot of it was learning, hearing what their perspective was, kind of hearing, what their take on the industry. And I was kind of gathering that they were saying this happens, these investment bankers, this happens in industries. We've seen it before. It's 5 years of consolidation, and then in 10 years, basically, you're only left with the big players, and then everybody's fighting for the crumbs.
Yeah.
So I have to know, again, not being in the day-to-day business, my job was to look down the road and see where's this industry going and where, what are the trends happening. Like, I don't want to be Blockbuster,
right?
Still selling VHS tapes. So that was part of it. Just seeing the trends, and there was a lot of activity, not just in my industry, but a lot of consolidation.
Oh, yeah.
So I entertained some conversations, and I had the same exact thing that I said to everybody. I said, I'm not interested in selling. I'm happy to have the conversation. My job as CEO is to explore opportunities and build relationships. I know how things work. Things start with a conversation. From the acorn grows the mighty oak. At some point, if I'm willing to sell, at least we'll know each other and we could talk at some point in the future. Right. And then I'd add, and the only way I would sell is if it's a ridiculous offer that is one that I just unprecedented that I can't refuse.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my spiel. And, but I really was not interested in selling. But then fast forward, a client of mine asked if I'd be willing to speak to their executive team. So this is a publicly held company. Yeah. And I said, well, of course, you're one of our best clients. Why wouldn't I speak to the head of strategic acquisition? And the same thing, great conversation. But, I told him the same, hey, who knows, down the road if things change, we'll see how that goes. And then nothing really happened from that. But then I got a call from the CEO a few months later. So this is now May of 2020.
Yeah.
And I had fallen off my roof and broke my arm. So I might have been on some drugs. But I spoke with the CEO of the firm, and he shared with me a very compelling vision for this company to be not only the largest, but the best restoration company on the planet. International company, people first, to make, to build a brand that will outlast us all. So as a CEO, he was talking my language, a compelling vision, sure, not just about dollars and cents. So I was interested in what he had to say, told him the same thing. But he said, hey, this is a great opportunity for you to take some chips off the table, yep, mitigate your risks, right? Because anybody owning a business has risk, and to create some huge opportunity for your team. And I thought, that's interesting. Nice talking to you. We'll see where it goes. So I'll kind of put a pause there. That was into May 2020.
Yeah, got it. So that's great. And listeners and viewers, I think it's interesting to really follow, one of the things obviously we do on the podcast, you've seen, sometimes we'll have investment bankers on or private equity folks, or, we delve into deal structure, we delve into valuation, and that's useful. But the other thing that, anybody who's listened to watch this podcast, consistently sees is that I'm also fascinated by people's journeys and their stories and their mindset and their evolution and what has, us, act. So, I think there's a real opportunity, especially with Damon, to listen through that. And then the other piece is that, is the ability. So one of the things I talk about is, okay, so what are some of the prerequisites to really have a great deal, especially if you're talking about an exit deal? And, I think that's super instructive. And it was, back on episode 25, that was super instructive, even though at that point there wasn't a immediate intention to exit. The whole concept of what Damon talked about with Michael Gerber and the E-Myth and whatever, or any of these, systems that we've learned in EO and other places about scaling, is that, one of the ways they say it sometimes is that you want your business to be scalable and saleable. Doesn't mean you're going to sell it. But the fact that you set it up that way actually helps you, whether, you're going to only spend 30 days, a year in the office and have a management team run it, or be more attractive to a buyer because the business is not dependent upon you. So it's the same set of actions that benefits you, whether you're going to sell or not, but which Damon shows it did, but then it also set him up for what ended up to be a very positive and lucrative sale, not only for him, but for his management team, right?
I think that's exactly right. That, strategic decisions that make sense. Yes. And right. That this makes sense if I don't sell it. It makes sense if I do sell. It's just, that was worth my time and investment to really build something out that would be a win-win either way. So yeah. I think you hit that nail on the head right there.
All right. So now we're at May of 2020. You've had another one of these conversations. Maybe it perked your ears a little more than some of the other ones, but still it's not at the point where you're really discussing, any kind of deal or negotiating, or maybe even, at that point, did you think there was I mean, there's always a possibility, but did you think it was likely you're going to sell it, or it was still in the category of, one of those conversations that, well, maybe interesting, learning something, whatever?
I think it was still, it's hard to say. I'd say it was mostly, I wasn't planning on selling, right?
Okay.
But it was interesting. And I think speaking to the CEO of a public company with a compelling vision, it perked my ears up more than any other, which were mostly investment bankers or, private equity firms and stuff where, frankly, I wasn't interested in that because, as I said in the early podcast, part of that virtual equity plan was I love my team. My team's been with me an average of 20 plus years. So they're like my family. So I just have a sense that, and no offense to private equity and venture capitalists, but that I don't want to be denigrating, but you're a product, right? For them to kind of, buy, package and flip, right?
Yeah.
Right. A commodity in a way is,
It's not, no, it's funny at all. I just interject for a second. I hadn't seen it in years. We were in a hotel room late one night and it was on Ron. I was down in Miami, my wife, as Damon knows. And the pretty woman came on, right? And remember the whole thing about Richard Gere is that he went from a guy who bought companies to break them up and destroy them, and then there was the old man with the shipping company, and he changed his ways and he said we're going to build ships together, right? There was a vision to build something as opposed to break it up, and I hear a parallel here.
Yeah, because I wanted to set, if I was going to do this, I want to set my team up that they had a great future and great opportunity in the long term, not that they were going to have a new boss and then 5 years from now have some boss that wasn't going to treat them well, and that then they would look back and say, "Hey, Damon, you did this to us, not for us or with us." Yeah. So this firm, First Service Residential, they're the largest residential property management firm in the U.S. They're behind First On-Site Property Restoration. Yep. So they're the only group backed by a public company. And they're the only ones that articulated any kind of long-term vision or even a compelling vision that wasn't just about making money. It was about really making a mark on the world and developing a world-class brand. So that certainly caught my attention. And I've been around business for a long time, and I know that these things go in cycles. There's a lot of money in the market. The market runs up, and, there's a lot of private equity money, a lot of cash around, but that doesn't always last forever. I've seen these cycles, and then if the market takes a hiccup, then all of a sudden all these deal opportunities dry up. So I was also aware of a window, perhaps, that you don't know how long it's going to be open for. So all these factors kind of were in the back of my mind. And as you know, I started a national affiliate group, Restoration Affiliates, which is kind of a virtual national firm so we could service our clients. I talked about that in the podcast. Yep. And a lot of those firms started being bought.
Okay.
So that was
you really saw the writing on the wall.
I saw some writing on the wall. And one of the bigger firms, one of my friend's firms, sold, and I called him to congratulate him. And, really, it was to find out the terms of the deal, the valuation and the formula. And of course, you wouldn't tell me, just like I'm not going to tell you. Right. But he flipped the script. He goes, "Would you be willing to have a conversation with these guys?" I said, "Well, it's funny. They're a client of mine. I spoke to the CEO, but yeah, sure. Why not? It's worth a conversation." And we started a conversation. They came to New York right in the middle of the pandemic, which, the top 3 executives of the firm came. So I took that they were serious. Right. And we met for several hours. And I said, "Listen, it only makes sense if it's an unprecedented, overwhelming offer that I can't refuse. Other than that, why would I fix what's not broken? It's profitable business. I have the lifestyle. I have the freedom. I don't answer to anybody. So it really has to be a compelling offer. Otherwise, I'm not going to change what's working for me." Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, obviously we're not going to get into any details of the deal terms or anything, but it was clearly you sold. So it must have been a compelling offer. All right.
Well, you know what? It was, but it wasn't, I think everybody talks about the top line numbers, right? But really there's so much more, as I'm sure you've covered in other podcasts. There's the structure of the deal. Yep. There's what was my role? What was their plan for my team? Right? Yep. Were they going to break my team up, or were they going to keep my team together? Were they going to invest in the company? What was their strategic plan? All of these things kind of came into relief. And then learning about them because we entered into due diligence, and obviously that's them finding out about us, but I was as serious as they were in doing due diligence on them, right? Because these would be my partners and really the people that my team's going to be working with. I mean, who I'm affiliating my reputation with, my name and my whole company with. So I did a lot of research on them and I actually spoke to every company that they had acquired up to that point.
Wow.
So they gave me, and I asked them confidentially, did the things they said when they were trying to buy you, now it's been 6 months, 8 months, a year, whatever, what's been the variance there? And consistently they said, no, they're people of their word. They're people first organization. Everything that they said they've done, and they've honored their word. And it just, I think it fit in with my own personal impression of the people that I was dealing with, the top executives of the firm. So through that process, them vetting us and us vetting them, we really built those relationships. Obviously, they knew me, but they needed to get to know my management firm and get comfortable with them. So I think that whole process really, it solidified it for me. And then obviously the terms of the deal at the end of the day, as well as my role, were very important. So all those things, I think, came out to be a win-win. And that's when the decision came where I called my dad, who, passed away. Yeah. I said, hey, Pop, what do you think? Should I do this? And I got a clear answer. Go for it.
Love it. Love it. Love it. And listeners and viewers, one of the things that Damon talked about as a general deal point is really important. There's this tendency, especially when you are doing a deal, whether it's a sale or any other kind of deal with a big company, there's often a tendency to think, I mean, it's starting to shift, and I'm going to talk a couple of reasons why, but there's a tendency to think that they're really doing the due diligence on you, right? And it really should be a two-way due diligence, right? Listen, most of the folks that I know are much more like Damon. They're not just in it to get a check at top dollar and whatever, and frankly, even at that, I mean, I remember years ago, I started pushing my clients to do more heavy due diligence, financial, legal, obviously cultural, all that stuff. But even on big companies, because like when Enron went down and all these, and WorldCom and all this stuff happened, the fact that it was some big public company actually didn't even guarantee that they were truly financially, sound. Like you were actually able, like, before that, if you would ask a big company for information on their financials, right, they'd be like, "What are you talking about? You don't need to see our financials. You just need to know we're going to give you a check, right?" And then actually, the one benefit of the Enrons of the world is it actually made it like you had a reason when you were representing the smaller company, to argue that I need to really actually do financial due diligence and legal due diligence and regulatory due diligence, because. So that was the one gift of like the Enrons. But also again, like, and especially, I think a lot of folks in our world, Damon, we're blessed to know a lot of entrepreneurs who, their main motivator isn't the money, right? It's, right. Sure. We like making good money and living a great lifestyle. Right. And that's part of it, but they do care about their teams and their clients and, right. That all of those, key constituents are well handled and that the legacy is not ruined and things like that. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that they're going to take a deal that's monetarily way off the mark, right? But it means that money is not, not in any way the only key factor. And you alluded to some of that.
Yeah. I have to say, I've always learned from other people's experiences. So a friend of mine had sold in my industry a year before, similar size company, similar type of company. And they sold to a firm backed by a private bank. Yep. And basically the whole company was imploding. Wow. Didn't have great leadership. They didn't take care of the team. So it was a cautionary tale for me to really, see what could happen. So those were that helped me ask some pointed questions about what their plans were for my team and their intentions, and about the leadership. Some of who I knew from the industry, obviously, they're a big national firm that was the platform that they invested in. But I have to say also, being an EO and investing decades in a network, I was able to reach out to entrepreneurs that I know had sold their businesses before. And this was key. I asked around, similar sized firms, not necessarily in my industry, because basically I don't know many people in my industry.
Right.
The entrepreneur group is a pretty niche industry. But I spoke to about a half a dozen entrepreneurs that had sold in the last 2 years. And I said, okay, what do you wish you knew when you were starting out that you learned at the end of the day? And each one had a different take on things. And I picked up something. So like one of the key things was one of my friends said, make sure you negotiate your role early in the process. Have difficult conversations early in the process. Said, why?
Yeah.
He goes, because what happens is they get you down the road to the ninth inning where you're pot committed to the deal, and then you'll accept certain terms of your role that you may not want to accept. So certain things like that you'd never know. I've never sold a company before. And then another who sold his company and now he's working for that company, buying companies on their behalf. Very valuable insight. He goes, Damon, you have to have an experienced investment banking firm, and you must have an experienced attorney that does M&A work, at least a half a dozen deals a year. He goes, because I'll tell you, we put terms out there when some of these firms, they hire a general attorney, and we put out 50 terms that a good attorney would knock down 40 of them, and an inexperienced attorney will let them all pass. We'll say, great, if you're not going to knock them down, we'll keep them in. So really learning from other people's experiences and leveraging my network was a valuable thing, probably saved me a lot of heartache, maybe some regrets. And, and I think the other point was strategically, because I had a profitable company and I lived within my means, I had saved up enough wealth that I didn't need to do a deal.
Yeah.
Right. So I did not have desperation, right? Because the truth is that this is going to be perhaps the biggest deal. Certainly up to this point it is. But if all my wealth was locked up in the business, it's a very different conversation, a very different energy in the negotiation, right? It's a desperation. Like if this doesn't happen, my whole future independence, financial wealth is at stake. But I had already achieved financial independence. So this was now not playing with house money, and I'm not, denigrating the money, but all these things, freeing myself from the business, having a great management team, having good systems, processes, structures, a good brand, and not needing to do a deal financially. All those things, I think, allowed me to just be in a better position to actually command a good deal. That was a fair deal for both of us, but I think that was acceptable to me and met my standards.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. And listen, folks, I mean, in my negotiating book, classic framework, it's CDE, right? Clarity, detachment, and equilibrium. And what Damon's talking about right now is the detachment part, right? He was able to be detached to the outcome. Sure. I mean, as I always say, he had a preference the deal get done, right? But you know what? If it didn't work out for him, he was in no place of scarcity, need, desperation, whatever. He would have been more than fine. So, I mean, that's such a place of power to come from. And there's no ego in that. There's just confidence in what's so. Listen, I got it. I've got it really good. This could be fine, for a long time. Right. So, if you don't get the right deal, that willingness to be able to walk away, not from anger, upset, ego, but from just knowing that you get clear on the criteria. And, you heard Damon, we're not going to get into specifics about the deal and the economics, but some of his other criteria, he's already alluded to, right? The team is taken care of. It's a people, first company. It's not, somebody who's just buying it for the money. It's right. So he got clear. So clarity, right? I talk about clarity first. He got clear on what was acceptable, not acceptable in the deal to him, what was important, right? Then he's able to be detached to the outcome because he doesn't have to do the deal. So he's got a preference, but, right. And then that helps you maintain your equilibrium. You don't get thrown off, in a negotiation. So that's a classic example of, and listen, that's, that's 30 years of work, right? To get you in that position, to be able to be in that position, right?
Well, I joke, I'm an overnight success over 30 years, right?
That's right. But
totally you're right. It was, I said I was committed to the process, but unattached to the outcome. Right. So I was going through, and frankly, I brought the buyer because they're from my industry. They know me, obviously. And I brought them to the investment banking firm. So, if this didn't work out, I wasn't planning on selling. This was the chance. Right. And if I decided I did want to sell, as I had always imagined, that I would run a process, right? That I'd get an auction and try to drive price up and get as many options as possible. But all the other things that I mentioned before, all the strategic things, all the cultural things, just seemed to be aligned. That this seemed to be the best shot that I had, and if it didn't work out, my worst case was I was going to walk away with at least a ballpark valuation, a real one, not an appraisal. Right. But a real life valuation that if they were only willing to go to this and I had an expectation to here and we walked away from each other, you also have to read the landscape, right? That we are the largest in the industry for our market. B, that there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of other companies that are consolidating in the industry. So, and I figured in the worst case, if I ran a process, then, if they were still interested in that, they can come back and be one of the bidders. And I even said that to them. I said, if this doesn't work out, then, if we can't get to a number, then, maybe sometime later you'll be doing it, competing against your 4 biggest competitors in the industry. So I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I was just trying to be really honest and clear about, that I have a high standard for my company and a high standard for all the reasons that I talked about. And you know what? They seem to recognize the value strategically, financially that our company offered. And so far, I think it's been a real win-win all around.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show. So I think is at least one more area that I want to just explore a little bit, and that is, sort of like the internal work that you did to have, because, we had a conversation before we went on air, and it seems like, that not only the deal's great, but like you're doing great, right? You're loving life. And that doesn't happen to everybody after they sell, right? For some folks, they find themselves not knowing what to do with themselves, or, I know some folks who had depression, or they're just lost a little bit, or they go. So I'm always also interested in sort of, the internal work, right? And what you did in that, or to create a new vision, or to get clear on what it would be that's having it really, really work for you. Because I also have examples of that. I mean, there's one client I remember that a friend of mine, and I joke about, he was a financial, consultant on a deal. He used to work at the company, and, and we had this vision, because so many entrepreneurs, they sell a company and then they get antsy, and a year later they're in another company, right? And we have, one guy, it's been 15 plus years, and, he's good, right? He bought the last lot down on Ponte Vedra Beach and knocked down the house and built a beautiful home. And he's, plays golf, and he had this dream to, the first year out, he's got a huge amount of money. He had a dream to go around the country in a like an Airstream, and like drive around. So they did that for a year, and he's great, but other people, struggle with it. So talk a little bit about, what you did and why you think, it's worked for you, not only economically, not only for the team, not only whatever, but from a personal life point of view.
Well, as you know, I mean, I'm kind of the poster child in the chapter of kind of having your cake and eat it, right? It's kind of, but I think part of it is being clear on what's important to me, right? Yeah. So certainly the business was the driver for a lot of the things in my life, but I wasn't willing to sacrifice some other areas. So obviously my family and being there for my kids and for my wife and investing in friendships and all that stuff. Like, you need time to do that. I didn't want to be a one-trick pony. So I had kind of found a way, through, delegating and understanding that my role is to make things happen, not get things done and all that. So I had already kind of, through the years, I think, created space. And I think also I have a lot of varied interests, right? I play in a band, I have a boat, I, play sports, so I have a lot of varied interests, right? Travel, and I've spoken to other people about this whole work-life integration. And I said to them, so do you have any other interests? No. So, what about your business? I love my business. What about your family? I love my business. I'm like, so you're working 100. He goes, I love it. Okay, well, then that's you. I mean, don't fix what's not broken. But that wasn't me. Right. I had a lot of other interests. And so I created that space. So even if things didn't work out at the end of the day, I still had, celebrated the journey. Right. So along the way, I wasn't like, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they have this almost balloon payment mentality. I'm going to sacrifice my health, my family, my interests, my friendships, all that I'm going to put 10 years in, and then one day I'm going to sell for $1 billion. That's not guaranteed, right? There's a lot of banana trucks that can come and take you out, and a lot of other factors that are not in your control. COVID, I mean, there's just one example of that that's completely unexpected, out of your control. I've seen industries, restaurant businesses, other ones that just got crushed. So, my take was kind of like balancing what was one day and also celebrating and living while the journey is going on. So I don't regret either one, So, but a lot of the benefits of that was, one, it gave my team confidence, and that I trusted them, and that they could stretch their legs and build their muscles as executives. Two, it made the company, I think, more valuable. Right. Sure. Because a new owner can come in there, and, it's not like the owner is the end all be all. And now you take that, heartbeat out of the company and you're left with a corpse. But I think after the sale, which is really what you're driving at, is I have friends who've sold, and they were the end all be all in their company, and they were going 100 miles an hour, and they made an offer they couldn't refuse, and they really didn't have any other interests.
Yeah.
So, and their identity was the entrepreneur. Right. So at least what I see, that when they hit the wall of selling, they got put into an existential tailspin, because what else, I lost my identity. I was important. The meeting.
Who am I if I'm not the founder, owner of,
Plus, the ego piece, like the meeting starts when I show up, it's like, there's all that stuff. So now you're not that important. Right. So you're kind of marginalized, and maybe you don't know what's important to you. And now the thing that was your full identity and was your activity, that gets ripped away from you very suddenly. And I could see how that, so far it's been 7 months, and I'm doing fine. I have a lot of other interests that I've leaned into, been doing a lot of travel. I'm still there as a resource for my team with the integration, which of course, any integration is cultural issues and service and systems and processes, all that integration stuff. So I'm a resource to my team to help navigate that new landscape. But I did get from one of the entrepreneurs who sold that I spoke to, their suggestion was, take a year. Don't do anything for a year. Right. Just kind of like let the dust settle. And then, because people are saying, oh, so you're retired now. That doesn't fit. Right. Like, I don't feel retired. I'm 54 years old. All right, I have a lot left to offer, but I'm not jumping into anything either in terms of big investments or any big commitments. So I'm allowing myself, just some time to ponder, and really taking all these strategic tools I learned in business and turning it in on my life. Is okay. Well, now let's say I'm on the back nine of my life. Yeah. What do I want that to look like? What do the next 20 years look like? 54 to 74. Is kind of a key time, where I've raised the kids, I've built a business, I've done all that. But so now what? So I don't necessarily have the answers, but it's very interesting going through the process of asking the questions.
Right, and you're okay with not having the answers, because I love the fact that it's one thing to say you had other interests, people have other interests. That's definitely part of. But I love the fact that you went to the identity conversation, because I think that's because people could look to develop other interests, but if their identity is still only related to the business, if their worth is only related to the business, those aren't going to satisfy them, either. And, and I've had, not in terms of an exit like that, but I've had various points at which, I remember going back to, the recession that was hitting already before 9/11 happened, and, whatever, I split up a law partnership back then. And, I had this like nice corner office, and the 42nd floor of what later became the Trump building, but at the time, it was not. And we were down on Wall Street. I had a view of Statue of Liberty, and it was a recession time hitting. Within, at 9/11, we were 5 blocks away. We were out of the office, for a while. I knew there was going to be an impact there, and I knew like I'm enough of a business guy, and one of the one of the minority of lawyers who understands financial statements and numbers, right? And I was like, I should be cutting back, right? I should be consolidating now and be careful on expenses, whatever, because I think we're going to have a rough patch here. And I ended up taking a smaller office in my office suite, renting out my big, beautiful corner office. And it was totally logical. The numbers made sense. The toughest part of that for me was the identity conversation of who am I if I'm not that guy in that, that successful guy in that amazing, corner office for the view of Statue of Liberty, right?
That's right.
Like, that was the process I had to go to. I think it's like a little microcosm of what some folks go to, like that was an identity conversation.
Yeah, I think the identity is a huge part. And then there's another thing I'm finding is the habits, right? 30 years of certain things like being on the computer, being in meetings, and feeling like you have to do something all the time. So, I think the idea of taking some time off and kind of, maybe replacing those habits, or at least looking at them and saying, well, am I doing this just because this is what I've done for 30 years? Like, so I've really tried to reduce my time sitting at computers, sitting at a desk, so I pretty much do that 1 day a week now. I've replaced kind of my mornings with more, health routines like stretching and meditating and about gratitude and eating healthy breakfast and going to the gym. So like all the stuff that people say they want to do, if they have the time, and now I have the time, and just kind of unwinding some of those really deeply ingrained habits of working and feeling like, besides the identity, that productivity,
yes.
Right? That if you're not doing something, then what are you? So I'm still working on just sitting still for a little bit, and I think it's going to still take some time with the energy I still have.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, just breaking, changing those old habits and then maybe replacing them with new habits that fit the new vision. That's awesome. So my final question on the podcast is different from episode 25, and it's particularly it's actually a cool question in light of where you're at. I think it's a cool question anyway. But so my highest ideal in life is freedom, and for me that's everything from freedom from like old people from oppression to why I'm an entrepreneur and I haven't had a boss for 30 something years. And so my final question always is, what does freedom mean to you, and how does it apply in your life and business? So it's a particularly interesting time to ask you that question now.
It is. Well, certainly being an entrepreneur, same thing. I mean, just about every entrepreneur says, I don't want to work for somebody. Right. I want to, because I even tell my kids, if you control your time, you control your life. Right? If you work for somebody, you don't control your time. So just that alone, being able to have the freedom of your schedule and be able to take a day off, or, cut out for the afternoon and take your kid to a ball game, whatever, all that freedom. But I think the questions are, what would you do if it weren't about money? Right? So what would you do if money wasn't even a factor?
Yeah.
Right. So that's an interesting thing. Or what were the things that you always wanted to do but didn't have time to do, or didn't make time to do? So those are the things that I'm working through now. Certainly, what's come up so far is making a contribution and sharing the good fortune and maybe some of the knowledge I've learned. I think I've gotten to the point, I think it's cliche that people who sell their businesses, they become speakers, coaches, and authors, right? And they go on a speaking circuit and they do all that kind of thing. I'm not interested in that at all.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, at least at this point where I'm at, is I'm not that interested in contributing to successful people being even more successful. I think I'm leaning towards figuring out where I can help people that maybe don't have opportunity and are disadvantaged, and I'm leaning towards younger people, children, where you can get them and have maybe an outsized impact over their lifetime. I haven't really nailed that down yet. It's part of
Yeah.
the process that I'm working through, but I think that's where I'm at. Like, kind of balancing having an amazing life, right? The travel, the experiences, the friendships, and, you know, the health and all that stuff. But I think that alone would, at the end of the day, be empty.
Yeah.
Because my business was very kind of mission based in helping, you know, heal the world and,
Yep.
you know, help people through difficult times. So certainly I've probably leaned into that part of it so far as the newfound freedom. But the other one is the freedom to really share the good fortune, not only just in terms of the resources, but in terms of time and experience. And, you know, I really feel that would feel like I'm doing well and doing good.
Love it. Love it. Love it. And, you know, listen, I've known you to be somebody who's been generous with his knowledge and his time and what, you know, and his expertise and mentoring and that kind of stuff, you know, even during the time when you were building the business. So, you know, so it's, you know, it's amazing to think about because, you know, you ask the questions, which is a great inquiry for people who are even, you know, aren't there like, what if you know, didn't have to worry about money? What if you had all this time? The cool part is you actually don't have to worry about money. You do have the time and, you know, and you could really focus on, what you want life to be and what your contribution want to be. So it's like, it's a beautiful moment. Like, you know, you're like, what I would say is, you know, you're really in the place where you're deciding, you know, like you have all those freedoms and now like, what am I going to do with them? Right. And that's,
you know what I refer to it as this process of creating blank canvas. Right.
Yes.
So so with a blank canvas, part of it is very exciting, right? All the possibility,
right.
But it's also very daunting. It's like
right.
Blank canvas. Where do I start? What do I do? So that's probably the best analogy that I can give. But net, it's a good problem to have.
I love it. I love it. Damon Gersh, thank you, my friend, for coming back on the Deal Quest podcast and sharing your journey. I think it's going to be, I know it's, you know, be very valuable for the listeners.
Always a pleasure, Corey.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Deal Quest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the Deal Quest community. Join the Deal Quest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your Deal Quest will bring.